Hi there. Welcome to NapTime History channel. Tonight we're standing in a cramped, damp room above a butcher shop in 16th century Nuremberg, where the first pale light of dawn creeps through a grimy window and falls across your unwashed face. You're about to wake up and realize, again, that you're the town executioner, and today, like most days, everyone you meet will treat you like you've got the plague, except worse, because at least plague victims get sympathy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these bedtime stories travel. All right, let's begin the story. Your eyes flutter open to the sound of rats scurrying across the floorboards, and immediately that familiar weight settles on your chest, not just the scratchy wool blanket that smells faintly of old blood despite countless washings, but the weight of what you are: the executioner, the hangman, the headsman, whatever they call you in whispers when you pass. You push yourself up from the straw mattress, joints already protesting from years of swinging heavy axes and hauling bodies, and shuffle to the window. Down below, the baker's apprentice spots you peering out and quickly crosses himself before hurrying away. It's going to be one of those days. Actually, scratch that. It's always one of those days. The isolation hits different in these early morning hours. While the rest of Nuremberg slowly comes alive with the sounds of merchants preparing their stalls and housewives fetching water, you exist in a bubble of deliberate avoidance. Your neighbors, if you can even call them that when they pretend you don't exist, have already begun their morning routines, careful to time their departures so they won't accidentally bump into you on the stairs. The widow Gertrude on the floor below actually installed a second door to her apartment, just so she could exit through the back alley rather than risk meeting you in the main hallway. Historians still argue whether executioners were legally required to live in specific quarters or if social pressure naturally pushed them to society's margins. But either way, here you are, in the worst part of town, above a butcher shop whose owner charges you double because your money is unclean. You splash yesterday's water on your face. The water boy won't deliver fresh water to your door, so you have to fetch it yourself after dark and catch your reflection in the small, warped mirror you inherited from your father. Oh yes, this delightful career is hereditary. Your father was the town executioner before you, and his father before him, stretching back at God knows how many generations of social pariahs who made their living ending lives. Some towns actually required executioners' sons to follow in their father's bloody footsteps, treating the profession like a cursed bloodline that couldn't be escaped. The mainstream historical fact that most people don't realize: in many parts of the Holy Roman Empire, becoming an executioner literally stripped you and your descendants of citizenship rights. You couldn't own property in respectable neighborhoods, couldn't join guilds, couldn't even testify in court unless it was about your own grim profession. You reach for your clothes, and here's where things get really special. That red coat hanging on the peg, not a fashion choice. In most German states, you're legally required to wear red or some other specific color so decent folk can spot you coming and get out of the way. Some regions get creative: yellow stripes in Bavaria, a special badge in Cologne, a particular style of hat in Frankfurt. The authorities want you visible, marked, branded like livestock, so nobody accidentally treats you like a human being. You pull on the rough linen undershirt first, noting the tears you'll need to mend yourself because no seamstress will touch your clothes. Then the red wool coat that's getting threadbare at the elbows. The dye has faded to a rusty brown in places, but it's still red enough to scream unclean to anyone with eyes. The hood comes next, and this is where modern folks usually get it wrong. You don't wear that black executioner's hood all the time like some medieval Batman. That's mostly for formal executions. And honestly, half the time you don't even bother with it unless the crowd's particularly rowdy or the condemned is someone important. The real daily headwear is usually just a specific style of cap that marks your profession, though you do keep the full hood tucked in your belt for when you need that extra layer of anonymity. Some executioners actually fought for the right to wear the hood more often, not for dramatic effect, but because it offered a blessed moment of privacy from the constant stares and whispers. Your boots are next: good solid leather that cost you 3 times what a normal craftsman would pay because the cobbler made you wait outside while he worked on them, then left them on his doorstep for you to collect after dark. He burned sage in his shop afterward, as if your money might contaminate his workspace with moral leprosy. The quirky historical tidbit here: some executioners got so fed up with price gouging merchants that they started making their own clothes and shoes, becoming surprisingly skilled craftsmen out of pure necessity. There's actually a surviving account from Augsburg of an executioner who made such fine boots that nobles secretly commissioned pairs from him, though they'd never admit it publicly. As you fasten your belt, the one with the special loops for carrying your smaller tools of the trade, you hear footsteps on the stairs outside. Then a pause, then rapid retreating. Someone needed to use the privy in the courtyard, but decided they could hold it rather than risk passing your door. This happens every morning. The dance of avoidance has become so predictable you could set your clock by it, if you could afford a clock, which you can't because the clockmaker won't sell to you. Historians still argue whether this social isolation was worse in Catholic or Protestant regions after the Reformation, but from where you're standing, religious denomination doesn't seem to matter much when everyone agrees you're spiritually contaminated. You attach your purse to your belt, feeling the weight of yesterday's payment, good silver coins that nobody wants to touch. Shopkeepers make you put your money in a special bowl, then they'll wash the coins in vinegar before adding them to their strongbox. Some actually keep a separate pouch for blood money and donate it directly to the church, hoping to cleanse their businesses of your taint. The irony, of course, is that you're one of the few people in town with steady employment and regular pay, while merchants fret about trade routes and craftsmen worry about guild politics. You've got job security that would make a modern government employee jealous. As long as people keep committing capital crimes, and boy, do they ever, you'll never go hungry. Before stepping out, You pause at the small shrine in the corner of your room. Yes, even executioners pray, though good luck finding a priest who'll hear your confession without looking like he's swallowing poison. The wooden cross is crude, carved by your own hands, because no respectable woodworker would make one for you. The Virgin Mary's face in the little painting is worn from years of desperate touching, seeking intercession for a soul that makes its living sending other souls to judgment. You mutter a quick prayer, crossing yourself with hands that have ended more lives than you can count, and wonder, not for the first time, if heaven has a special entrance for people like you, or if you're already damned by profession. The church bells are calling the faithful to morning mass, but you know better than to head toward their bronze song. You tried attending services when you first inherited this job, remember? The way conversation stopped when you entered, how the congregation parted like you were Moses with very bad publicity. The priest himself, Father Heinrich, who'd known you since childhood, suddenly developed an urgent need to reorganize the altar whenever you approached for communion. After a few weeks of this, the bishop sent a letter, very politely worded, all theological concern for your immortal soul, but the message was clear: find somewhere else to pray. Some parishes are more creative about it. They'll let you attend, sure, but you have to stand in a special spot near the door, marked by a red stone or a painted line. Can't contaminate the good Christians with your presence. You're allowed to listen to the Word of God, but from a safe distance, like spiritual leprosy might be contagious. In some towns, they actually built special executioner's doors in churches. Separate entrances so you could slip in and out without mingling with decent folk. The Cathedral of St. Sebald in Nuremberg has one, though they'll tell tourists it's for late arrivals now. Historical revisionism at its finest. The real knife twist comes at confession. Canon law says every Christian deserves the sacraments, but good luck finding a priest who'll hear yours without visible discomfort. Father Heinrich once made you confess through a special partition with extra thick cloth, as if your sins might seep through the regular confessional screen. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I beheaded 3 people this week on judicial orders. How's a priest supposed to respond to that? The theological gymnastics are impressive. You're doing lawful work ordered by legitimate authorities, but you're also ending lives made in God's image. Some priests refuse altogether, claiming they can't absolve someone who plans to sin again tomorrow. Others will hear your confession, but insist you show proper contrition for your profession, even though quitting isn't exactly an option unless you fancy starving. The quirky historical detail. Some executioners got so desperate for spiritual guidance, they turned to traveling monks or hermit priests, holy men already living on society's fringes, who figured ministering to the ultimate outcast might score them extra heaven points. There's a documented case from 1547 of an executioner in Bamberg who traveled 30 miles every Easter to confess to a hermit living in a cave, because it was the only way he could receive absolution without the priest dry heaving through the whole sacrament. You've developed your own solution. Private prayer in the pre-dawn darkness at the small chapel of St. Jodoc, patron saint of pilgrims and outcasts. The chapel sits outside the city walls, fitting, really, and at this hour, you can slip in and out without encountering anyone, except maybe a few drunks sleeping off last night's adventures. You make your way through the empty streets, red coat hidden under a dark cloak, moving with the practiced stealth of someone who's learned that visibility brings nothing but trouble. A cat hisses from an alley. Apparently, even animals can sense what you are. Or maybe it's just being a cat. Inside the chapel, you kneel on the cold stone floor, far from the altar, because old habits die hard. The silence wraps around you like a shroud, probably not the best metaphor given your profession, but accuracy counts. Here, in the darkness broken only by a few flickering candles left by other early morning outcasts, you can pretend for a moment that you're just another sinner seeking grace. You mumble through the paternoster, adding your own desperate postscript, and please, Lord, let today's execution go cleanly. One stroke, no suffering, no jeering crowds, just let it be quick. Historians still argue whether executioners were more or less religious than the general population, but when your job involves sending souls to judgment, you tend to think about the afterlife more than your average baker or merchant. The chapel door creaks, and you tense. Another figure enters, a woman, heavily veiled, who freezes when she spots your silhouette. Even in the darkness, even with your coat hidden, somehow people always know. Maybe it's the way you hold yourself, the weight of all those deaths bearing down on your shoulders. She backs out quickly, probably deciding her prayers can wait. You're used to it by now, but it still stings. That moment when recognition dawns and fear replaces whatever brought them seeking comfort in God's house. You finish your prayers quickly, adding one for the veiled woman, because why not? Maybe God keeps a special tally for prayers from the damned. Maybe they count double like hazard pay for the soul. Back in your quarters, your stomach growls, reminding you that even social pariahs need breakfast. The morning meal situation is its own special form of torture. See, you've got money, good money. Actually, the city pays you well for doing the job nobody else will touch. But trying to spend that money, that's where things get complicated. The baker won't sell to you directly. The butcher makes you wait outside, while his apprentice brings your order wrapped in old sacking, like your very presence might curdle the milk or spoil the sausages. And the taverns? Forget about sitting down for a nice bowl of porridge with the other early risers. You've got an arrangement with Wilhelm, who runs the Crooked Crow, and yes, that's really its name, because apparently even your breakfast spot needs to sound cursed. Wilhelm's grandfather was a gravedigger, so he's got a soft spot for the professionally untouchable. He'll serve you, but only in the back room, the one where they usually count money and occasionally conduct business that requires privacy. You eat alone while listening to the normal customers laughing and chatting in the main room, separated by a thin wooden wall and an infinite social gulf. The food's actually pretty good. Wilhelm's wife makes a mean blood sausage, which feels ironically appropriate, but it always tastes a little like loneliness. This morning, Wilhelm himself brings your plate, setting it down with the careful distance of someone handling a possibly rabid dog. Busy day ahead? He asks, which is his polite way of asking if anyone's scheduled to die today. You nod, mouths full of black bread that's only slightly stale. One advantage of being Wilhelm's first customer is getting the freshest leftovers. The counterfeiter, you manage between bites, Hans Mueller, caught making fake guilders. Wilhelm winces. Counterfeiting's a nasty business, usually punished by boiling in oil, though the city council's been pushing for simple hanging lately. Something about the smell of boiling human putting tourists off their lunch. The economics of blood money fascinate modern historians. And here's the truly weird part. You get paid per execution, but also per torture session, per flogging, per branding, with a whole complex fee structure that would make a modern medical billing department jealous. Hanging, that's 5 guilders. Beheading, 10, because it requires more skill. Breaking on the wheel, 15, plus extra if you have to do the thing where you strangle them first as an act of mercy. Torturing someone for confession, that's by the hour, like the world's most horrifying consulting gig. Some executioners kept detailed account books, and they're simultaneously fascinating and deeply disturbing reading. March 15th, branded Thomas Fisher for theft, 2 guilders. March 16th, flogged. Marie Hartman, adultery, 3 guilders. March 20th, removed Johann Schmidt's head, murder, 10 guilders plus 1 guilder tip from grateful family. But here's the thing about blood money. Nobody wants it. You'd think money is money, but shopkeepers act like your coins carry moral contamination. They'll take them, usually, but only after making you wait, making you put them in special containers, making sure everyone sees how reluctant they are to engage in commerce with the likes of you. Some merchants keep your coins separate and donate them directly to the church poor box, figuring charity might cleanse the taint. Others wash them in holy water, yes, really, before mixing them with their regular money. The quirky historical tidbit? In some towns, executioners' coins were actually marked with special symbols so people could identify and avoid them. Imagine trying to buy bread and having the baker examine each coin like he's looking for signs of spiritual leprosy. Wilhelm returns with your small beer, watered down more than usual. You notice, but you're not going to complain. Complaining requires alternatives, and you're fresh out of those. You ever think about finding another line of work? He asks, which is bold for him. Usually, people pretend your job just happened to you, like catching a cold or inheriting a curse, which, technically, you did inherit it, but that's beside the point. You look at him over your mug and almost laugh. What would you do? Who would hire an ex-executioner? What guild would accept you? It's not like you can put 5 years' experience in judicial killing on your resume and expect the Candlemakers Guild to welcome you with open arms. Historians still argue whether it was legally impossible or just socially impossible for executioners to change professions. But from where you're sitting, the distinction feels academic. You finish your breakfast in silence, leave your coins on the table. Wilhelm won't touch them while you're watching, and head for the door. In the main room, conversation dims as you pass, even though most patrons can't see you from their seats. Word travels fast in a tavern. Someone probably recognized your red coat. when you came in, and now everyone knows the hangman's in the building. You catch a glimpse of a young couple through the doorway, sharing breakfast and making moon eyes at each other, and feel that familiar twist in your gut. That could never be you. Not the breakfast part. You've got that sorted, technically, but the casual intimacy, the public affection, the simple assumption that you deserve to be loved and seen loving must be nice. Living in a world where your touch doesn't make people flinch. The walk to your workshop takes you through the narrow back alleys where decent folk don't venture before noon. Your equipment lives in a converted stable behind the city jail, far enough from residential areas that the sound of grinding metal won't disturb anyone's morning prayers. The city provides the space, grudgingly, because even they understand that a dull axe makes for messy executions, and messy executions make for angry crowds, and angry crowds make for political headaches. Still, they put you as far from civilization as possible while still being technically within the city walls. Can't have the kiddies stumbling upon the hangman sharpening his tools on their way to school. You unlock the heavy door with the oversized key that weighs down your belt, and the familiar smell hits you: oil, rust, old leather, and something else that never quite washes out, no matter how much lye you use. Your tools hang on the walls in orderly rows: axes of various weights, swords for the nobles who can afford a honorable death, ropes in different thicknesses because you never know if you're hanging a skinny pickpocket or a well-fed merchant. The breaking wheel leans in the corner like the world's most sinister wagon wheel, which is essentially what it is. Each tool has its own maintenance ritual, its own quirks and requirements, and you know them all intimately, more intimately than you know any living person, if you're being honest. The morning routine starts with the axes. You've got three: the everyday working axe for your standard criminal, the ceremonial great axe for special occasions, and the backup, because nothing ruins an execution faster than your blade getting stuck in someone's spine. That actually happened to your father once. The condemned was this enormous miller who'd murdered his wife, built like an ox with a neck to match. First swing barely broke the skin. Second swing got stuck. By the third attempt, the crowd was throwing things, and the miller was screaming prayers, and your father was sweating through his hood. Took 5 swings total. Your father came home that night and made you promise to always keep a sharp backup. Better to over-prepare than to stand there hacking at some poor bastard like you're chopping firewood, he'd said, and then gotten very drunk. You run your thumb along the edge of your primary axe, sharp enough to shave with, though you'd never try. Some executioners supposedly did, as a way of demonstrating their tool's readiness, but you're not that much of a showman. The grinding wheel sits in the corner, foot-powered and loud enough to wake the dead, which feels appropriate. As you work the pedal and bring the blade to the stone, sparks fly in the dim morning light filtering through the one grimy window. The sound, that horrible shrieking of metal on stone, echoes off the walls. Somewhere outside, a dog starts howling. Animals always know when death's tools are being prepared, or maybe it just doesn't like the noise. Hard to tell with dogs. The quirky historical detail nobody talks about. Executioners often became skilled engineers out of necessity. Your profession requires understanding leverage, momentum, anatomy, and physics in ways that would make university scholars jealous. You need to know exactly how much weight a rope can bear, how to calculate drop distances to ensure a clean break versus slow strangulation, how to position someone on the wheel to maximize display time while minimizing or maximizing, depending on the sentence, suffering. Some executioners invented new devices, refined old ones, even consulted with other towns on optimal scaffold construction. There's a whole informal network of professional killers sharing tips on blade angles and rope treatments. Try soaking the rope in vinegar, prevent stretching, and sharpen at 15 degrees for cleaner cuts through vertebrae. It's like the world's most morbid trade convention, conducted entirely through letters and occasional meetings at crossroads. While the axe sharpens, you inspect the ropes, hemp mostly, though you've got one silk rope that the city splurged on for executing nobility, because apparently even in death, class distinctions matter. Each rope needs checking for frays, weak spots, stretches. A rope that breaks during a hanging is worse than a dull axe, at least with the axe. You can take another swing. A broken rope means either finishing the job by hand, messy, undignified, traumatic for everyone, or letting the condemned go free, which the authorities really frown upon. You run each rope through your hands, feeling for imperfections, muscle memory guiding your fingers to potential failure points. Your hands are surprisingly soft for someone in your line of work. All that oil treatment for the ropes keeps them moisturized. Silver lining to everything, even judicial murder. The torture devices require less maintenance, but more cleaning. The thumb screws, the iron boots, the various pincers and brands. They're simple tools, really, but they accumulate. Residue. You clean them with the mechanical detachment of someone washing dishes, because thinking too hard about what you're scrubbing off leads nowhere good. The city requires you to maintain these tools even though torture's becoming less fashionable. Historians still argue whether the decline in judicial torture was driven by Enlightenment values or just the practical concerns about unreliable confessions. But you suspect it's because torture's messy and time-consuming and makes everyone involved feel a little sick, even you, and you're supposedly immune to squeamishness. Outside, you hear voices, neighbors going about their morning business, careful to give your workshop a wide berth. Someone's whistling, badly, and the normalcy of it strikes you like a physical blow. While they're heading to market or work or visiting friends, you're here oiling implements of death, preparing to end someone's life in a few hours. The contrast never stops being jarring. You finish with the axes, test the ropes one more time, and lock everything away. Time to collect today's client from the jail. As you step outside, the whistling stops abruptly. The owner, a young apprentice from the bakery, has spotted you and frozen mid-tune. You nod politely. He doesn't nod back. Nobody ever does. The city jail squats like a stone toad near the courthouse, all damp walls and barred windows that never quite catch the sun. As you approach, the guards see you coming and develop a sudden fascination with their dice game, studying those carved bones like they contain the secrets of the universe. Morning, Fritz. Morning, Klaus, you say, because maintaining politeness in the face of social rejection is about the only dignity you've got left. They grunt something that might charitably be interpreted as acknowledgement. Fritz actually spits after you pass, though he waits until he thinks you're out of earshot. You're not. You've developed excellent hearing over the years, comes with the territory when everyone whispers about you. Inside, the jailer, a thin man named Georg, who always smells like cabbage and disappointment, wordlessly hands you the paperwork. Hans Mueller, age 34, counterfeiter, sentenced to die by hanging at noon. The formal language makes it sound so clinical, like you're picking up a package rather than a human being who'll be dead in a few hours. Georg points down the corridor without meeting your eyes. Third cell on the left, his wife's with him. Ah, those are always the worst, the family visits. You've gotten pretty good at tuning out the sobbing, but there's something about the quiet conversations, the desperate attempts at normal talk in deeply abnormal circumstances that burrows under your professional detachment. You make your way down the corridor, boots echoing off stone, and sure enough, there's crying coming from the third cell. Not the condemned man. Hans Mueller sits quietly on his straw pallet, while a woman in a patched dress clutches his hands through the bars. She's trying to be strong, you can tell, but tears track down her cheeks like accusations. When she spots you, her expression transforms from grief to pure hatred. You, she spits, and suddenly she's up and rushing at you, hands clawed like she wants to tear your eyes out. You monster! You demon! How can you? Hans catches her arms, pulls her back. Greta, no, please, don't make this harder. The thing is, you understand her rage. If someone was about to kill your spouse, if you had a spouse, which you don't and never will, you'd probably want to claw their eyes out too. But understanding doesn't make it easier when she starts offering you things. Please, she says, voice breaking. I have money saved. Not much, and my mother's ring. It's real silver, and I could. She trails off, probably realizing she's propositioning the one person in the city who can't be bribed. Not because you're particularly virtuous, but because accepting a bribe to spare someone means the city council will just hire another executioner to kill both Hans and you. Job's security works both ways in this profession. I'm sorry, you say, and you mean it. Though sorry doesn't change anything. The sentence has been passed. I have no power to alter it, which is true, but also a convenient shield. Hide behind the law, behind duty, behind the formal structures that turn murder into justice. Hans looks at you then, really looks at you, and you see something unexpected in his eyes. Pity. The condemned man pities you. It's all right, Greta, he says softly. This man's just doing his job. Like the baker bakes and the smith makes horseshoes. Don't blame the axe for the trees falling. Historians still argue whether condemned criminals typically blamed their executioners or saw them as mere instruments of justice, but in your experience, it varies. Some spit at you, curse your bloodline, promise their ghosts will haunt you forever. Others, like Hans, achieve a weird sort of philosophical acceptance. A few even tip you, yes, really, as if good service in dying deserves recognition. The strangest ones are those who try to befriend you in their last hours, desperate for any human connection before the end. You've learned to maintain professional distance either way. Getting emotionally involved with someone you're about to kill is a recipe for madness, and this job provides plenty of that already. 5 minutes more. You tell them, which is more than the law requires, but less than compassion demands. You step back to give them privacy for their goodbyes, studying the fascinating pattern of mold on the opposite wall while Greta whispers broken promises about taking care of his mother, about naming their unborn child after him, about keeping his memory alive. That last part catches you off guard. She's pregnant. Of course she is. Because this day wasn't going to be hard enough already. Hans whispers back, words you deliberately don't hear, and then they're kissing through the bars, and you're remembering why you drink so much. When time's up, and you know without checking any clock, because you've developed an internal execution timer accurate to the minute, you clear your throat. Greta pulls away, takes one last look at her husband, then walks past you toward the exit. She pauses at the doorway, turns back. "I hope you burn in hell," she says quietly, matter-of-factly, like she's observing the weather. "I hope you burn forever." Then she's gone, and it's just you and Hans and the weight of what's coming. "She doesn't mean it," Hans says, as you unlock his cell. "She's just—" He shrugs, chains clanking. "Yeah, she probably does mean it. Sorry about that." You almost laugh at the absurdity, the condemned man apologizing to his executioner for his wife's entirely justified hatred. "I've heard worse." You tell him, which is true. Last month, a pickpocket's mother threw actual feces at you. That was a memorable morning. Hans nods, lets you check his shackles, follows docilely as you lead him toward the courtyard, where Georg's already assembled the guard detail. The quirky historical tidbit? Some condemned prisoners actually preferred walking to their execution with just the executioner rather than a full guard complement. Something about the dignity of walking to death like a man rather than being dragged like an animal. Hans seems to be one of those, head high despite the circumstances. As you exit into the morning sun, when did it get so bright? Hans squints and takes a deep breath. "Beautiful day," he observes. "Shame to waste it on dying." You don't respond, because what would you say? "Yes, lovely weather for a hanging. At least it's not raining." Small talk feels obscene when you're walking someone to their death. Instead, you just walk, conscious of Greta's curse still echoing in your ears, of the life growing in her belly that will never know its father, of the sun shining on just and unjust alike, while you prepare to turn a counterfeiter into a corpse. Some days this job feels heavier than others. This is definitely one of the heavy days. The market square transforms on execution days. What's normally a cheerful chaos of vegetable sellers and fishmongers becomes an amphitheater of death, complete with stadium seating and snack vendors. Yes, snack vendors. Nothing works up an appetite quite like watching someone die. Apparently, by the time you arrive with Hans, enterprising merchants have already set up stalls selling ale, roasted nuts, and, this is real, Little wooden toy gallows for the children. Hang your own criminal, the toy seller shouts, just like the real thing. You wonder if he'd be quite so enthusiastic if he knew his supplier's cousin was about to experience the non-toy version. The scaffold stands in the center of the square like a wooden altar to justice, or vengeance, or whatever helps people sleep at night. Your assistant, young Eric, he's 45, but he'll be young Eric until he dies because his father was also Eric, has already done the setup. Rope at the correct length for Hans's height and weight, trapdoor mechanism oiled and tested, everything ready for the show. Because that's what this is, really. Not justice, not deterrence, but entertainment for the masses. The city could execute criminals privately in the prison courtyard, but where's the fun in that? No, they want spectacle, moral instruction through visceral example, plus it's good for local commerce. The crowd's already substantial and growing. You spot the usual types, the bloodthirsty enthusiasts who never miss an execution, the pickpockets working the distracted crowd, ironic, considering what happened to their colleague last week, the moral scolds who come to tut-tut about the wages of sin while secretly enjoying every moment. Front row seats go to the wealthy burghers who can afford to pay for the privilege of an unobstructed view. They've got cushions and everything, like they're attending an opera instead of a killing. Behind them, the common folk beckon wherever they can, climbing on barrels, hoisting children on shoulders, jostling for position. Quite the turnout, Hans observes as you guide him toward the scaffold steps. His voice shakes only slightly. I should feel honored, I suppose. All these people taking time from their day to watch me die. The gallows humor, pun unfortunately intended, is a defense mechanism you've seen before. Make jokes about your own death and maybe it won't seem so real. You don't respond, focusing instead on the technical details. Check the rope one more time. Ensure the trapdoor's catch is properly set. Ignore the vendors selling Hans Mueller's Last Confession broadsheets that are completely fabricated because Hans hasn't confessed to anything beyond the counterfeiting. The crowd noise builds as you and Hans climb the scaffold. Someone throws a rotten apple that splatters against the platform, unclear whether they're aiming for you or him. The city authorities sit in their special box, looking appropriately grave and important. The mayor's wearing his fancy chain of office, because apparently executing counterfeiters requires formal dress. Father Friedrich stands ready with last rites, though he keeps shooting nervous glances at you, like your presence might invalidate the sacrament. The whole thing has the feel of a festival, except the guest of honor ends up dead. This is when the master of ceremonies, yes, that's a real job, starts his spiel. Heinrich the Herald, they call him, a man with a voice that could wake the dead and a flair for dramatic presentation. He begins reading the official charges in that sing-song tone that carries across the square. Know all present that Hans Mueller, son of Wilhelm Mueller, stands convicted of the heinous crime of counterfeiting the coin of the realm. The crowd loves this part, the formal justification that transforms a public killing into a morality play. See what happens when you break the law? This could be you. While Heinrich drones on, you make final preparations. Position Hans on the trapdoor. Check that the noose sits correctly, not too tight yet. That comes later. The quirky historical detail nobody mentions? There's an art to rope placement. Too far forward and you risk slow strangulation. Too far back and the head might pop clean off, which really upsets the crowd. You need that sweet spot just behind the left ear, where the knot will snap the neck cleanly when the body drops. It's the kind of technical knowledge you can't exactly share at parties, not that you get invited to parties. The crowd starts getting restless as Heinrich reaches the genealogical portion of his speech. Apparently, it matters that Hans's great-grandfather was also named Wilhelm, and some enterprising youths begin a betting pool on how long Hans will twitch. Charming. The pickle vendor runs out of stock and starts a loud argument with customers who claim he's watering down the brine. Two dogs get into a fight near the scaffold, adding barking to the general cacophony. This is justice in action, part solemn ritual, part street fair, part barely controlled chaos. Finally, mercifully, Heinrich winds down, and may God have mercy on his soul. The crowd cheers like he's announced free beer. You step forward to do your part, and suddenly the square goes quieter. This is the moment they've come for, the transformation of a living man into a moral lesson. Hans looks at you, manages a weak smile. Make it quick, yeah, he whispers. You nod, adjust the noose one final time, and reach for the lever. In the crowd, you spot Greta pushing her way to the front, hand pressed to her belly, eyes locked on her husband. You wish she'd stayed home. Some things shouldn't be witnessed by those who'll have to live with the memory. Historians still argue whether public executions actually deterred crime or just provided free entertainment for the masses. From where you're standing, watching pickle juice drip through the scaffold boards while someone takes bets on a man's death twitches. You're pretty sure it's the latter, but hey, at least the toy gallows are selling well. Supply and demand, right? The invisible hand of the market at work, right next to the very visible hand of the executioner. Your hand grips the lever, and time does that strange stretching thing it always does in these moments. The crowd holds its collective breath. Hans closes his eyes, and you pull. The trapdoor drops with a bang that echoes across the square, and Hans drops too, the rope snapping taut with a sound like a wet branch breaking. But instead of the clean crack of a broken neck, there's a horrible gurgling wheeze. The knot has slipped. Instead of sitting behind his ear where it would deliver instant death, it's under his chin, and Hans is strangling slowly, legs kicking in that awful dance that the crowd calls the gallows jig. The audience reaction splits immediately. Some cheer, the real sickos who prefer their executions messy. Others groan in disappointment, like they've been cheated of a clean show. A few of the more delicate souls faint, though given the pressed crowd, they can't actually fall anywhere. Hans's face turns purple, eyes bulging, hands clawing uselessly at the rope. The gurgling gets worse. This is every executioner's nightmare, the botched job, the technical failure that transforms quick justice into prolonged torture. You're already moving, climbing down the scaffold's support beam with practiced speed. Some executioners would let it play out. Dead is dead, after all. But you've got professional pride. Damn it. Plus, Greta's watching, and somehow that makes it worse. You wrap your arms around Hans's thrashing legs and pull down hard, adding your weight to his, trying to speed up what the failed knot started. It's an intimate embrace, this murder hug, your face pressed against his convulsing body while the crowd roars opinions about your technique. Pull harder, you incompetent fool, someone shouts. Let him dance, yells another. A fight breaks out near the beer vendor between those who think you should let Hans strangle naturally and those who appreciate your efforts to hasten things. The city authorities look deeply uncomfortable in their fancy box. This isn't the smooth demonstration of justice they wanted. The mayor's actually covering his face with his ceremonial chain, which can't be good for the gold plating. It takes 4 minutes, 4 long, horrible minutes of Hans's body fighting for air it can't get, of your arms aching from the dead weight, of the crowd growing increasingly unruly. When he finally goes limp, when the last tremor fades and you can let go, your red coat is soaked with sweat and other fluids you'd rather not think about. You climb back onto the platform to cut the body down. Protocol says it hangs for an hour, but given the circumstances, you're making an executive decision. That's when the crowd turns properly ugly. Murderer, someone screams, and then they're all screaming it, as if the botched hanging somehow makes you more culpable than a clean one would have. A rock flies past your head, then another, then what looks like a boot, because apparently someone hates you enough to sacrifice footwear. Young Eric scrambles up to help you cut Hans down while dodging projectiles, and together you manage to get the body onto the death cart before the full riot starts. The city guard finally remembers they have a job besides looking decorative and forms a protective cordon around the scaffold. Captain Brenner, a man who usually treats you like something he'd scrape off his boot, actually looks concerned. Get to the cemetery, he hisses, now, before they decide to test whether executioners hang as well as counterfeiters. You don't need telling twice. Young Eric takes the reins while you huddle in the back with Hans's still warm corpse, pelted by garbage and worse as the cart rumbles toward the city gates. The mainstream historical fact people forget: executioners faced real physical danger from mobs, especially after botched executions. There are documented cases of executioners being lynched by angry crowds, beaten to death, or driven from towns by torch-wielding citizens. Your profession makes you legally untouchable in one sense, but very physically touchable when things go wrong. The city might need you, but that doesn't mean they'll protect you from their own citizens' righteous fury. By the time you reach the cemetery, your hands won't stop shaking, not from fear, you're used to that, but from the muscle memory of holding Hans while he died, feeling each convulsion through your arms. The gravediggers are waiting, having heard the commotion from town. They eye you with the particular mixture of sympathy and disgust reserved for fellow social outcasts who've had a bad day at work. Rough one? Asks the head digger, taking in your disheveled state and the various vegetable stains decorating your coat. Rope slipped, you manage, helping transfer Hans to his pauper's grave. No consecrated ground for executed criminals, just a patch of earth outside the cemetery proper where the suicides and unbaptized babies go. Could hear the crowd from here, the gravedigger notes, starting to shovel dirt. Sounded like they wanted to add another body to the pile. You laugh, but it comes out cracked. Wouldn't be the first time, and it wouldn't. Your predecessor, not your father, but the one before, got beaten so badly after a botched beheading that he couldn't work for 6 months. The city had to import an executioner from Augsburg at triple the usual rate, as Hans disappears under shovelfuls of earth. You remember Greta's face in the crowd, the moment when hope turned to horror as she realized the hanging had gone wrong. She'll carry that image forever, not her husband's quick death, but his slow strangulation while you hugged his legs like some grotesque parody of affection. The quirky historical tidbit? Some executioners' wives, the few who had them, actually coached their husbands on weight pulling techniques specifically for situations like this. Death's embrace, they called it, turning assisted strangulation into a learnable skill. Your father tried to teach you once, using a sandbag, but sandbags don't convulse like dying men. Young Eric touches your shoulder. We should go, before the crowd decides to come looking. He's right. The cemetery feels too exposed, too close to town. You need to disappear for a while, let the city's anger cool, maybe visit your cousin in Rothenburg. Oh, wait, you don't have a cousin in Rothenburg because your entire family tree is poisoned by association. Maybe just hide in your room and drink until the shaking stops and you can pretend today was just another day at the office. Just another normal day in the life of a Renaissance executioner, where killed a man badly is a workplace performance issue, and the employee review comes in the form of flying produce. The next morning arrives with a pounding on your door that matches the pounding in your skull. Too much wine after yesterday's disaster, but what else were you supposed to do? Celebrate? The knocking persists, authoritative and impatient. Open up! Official business. You recognize the voice, Councilman Weber, the one who always looks like he's sucking lemons, probably here to fine you for the botched hanging. Yes, that's a thing. Mess up an execution, and the city docks your pay, because apparently nearly getting stoned to death by an angry mob isn't punishment enough. You stumble to the door, still wearing yesterday's stained coat because you passed out before changing. Weber stands there with 2 guards, holding a cloth over his nose like your moral contamination might be airborne. The council requires your immediate attendance, he announces, then adds with obvious distaste, and bring your tools. There's been a development. A development. That's never good. In your line of work, developments usually mean someone important needs killing in a hurry, or worse, someone wants to buy something from your professional collection. The medical trade, you see, has taken a peculiar interest in your work, not the actual killing part. Doctors leave that to you, but the byproducts. Blood from executed criminals supposedly cures epilepsy, consumption, and various other ailments that real medicine can't touch. Ground up skull helps with headaches. Rendered human fat makes excellent ointments. The hand of a hanged man, dried and prepared correctly, becomes a hand of glory that thieves believe can open any lock and freeze people in place. It's all nonsense, of course, but try telling that to desperate people who'll pay gold for a vial of criminal blood. At the council chambers, Weber leads you not to the usual meeting room, but to a side chamber where a well-dressed stranger waits. The man wears physician's robes and has that particular combination of arrogance and squeamishness you've come to recognize in medical men. This is Dr. Fassbender from Heidelberg University. Weber explains. He requires materials for his anatomical studies. Ah, that kind of development. The good doctor wants a body, but not just any body. Fresh bodies are hard to come by legally unless you're an executioner with access to the recently condemned. I need the complete corpse of an executed criminal, Fassbender says, not meeting your eyes. Delivered fresh, within hours of death, I'm willing to pay handsomely. He names a sum that would cover your expenses for 3 months. The body must be intact, no quartering, no breaking on the wheel, hanging or clean beheading only. You almost laugh. After yesterday's fiasco, the council will probably insist on beheading for a while. When, you ask? Fassbender shifts uncomfortably. The sooner the better. My studies cannot wait. And Weber clears his throat. It happens that we have 3 thieves scheduled for next week. And this is how you become a supplier for the medical trade. It's perfectly legal. The law says executed criminals forfeit all rights, including the right to a proper burial. Their bodies become property of the state, and if the state wants to sell that property to fund important medical research and line council pockets, who's going to complain? The dead criminals? Their families who are usually too poor or ashamed to protest? The church frowns on it, but they frown on everything you do. So what's new? The quirky historical detail that makes your stomach turn. Some executioners ran a brisk side business in human parts, keeping detailed catalogs like some macabre grocery store. Fresh blood, drawn this morning, guaranteed potent. Skull fragments, finely ground, perfect for headache remedies. Genuine hangman's rope, still bearing the deceased's essence. They'd have regular customers, usually apothecaries and cunning women who'd incorporate these materials into their remedies. One executioner in Frankfurt supposedly made more from selling body parts than from actual executions. But it gets worse. See, people don't just want random criminal parts. They have specific requests. Virgin's blood for certain love potions, the heart of a murderer for courage talismans, the eyes of a thief to help find lost objects. You become not just a killer, but a butcher, parsing out the dead like cattle, reducing human beings to their saleable components. And the learned doctors, the ones who claim to advance human knowledge, they're often the worst, demanding fresh brains for study, wanting to observe the criminal facial features that surely must exist, collecting skulls to measure and categorize. Back in your workshop, you prepare the necessary equipment while trying not to think about what you're preparing it for. The bone saw needs sharpening, can't have it getting stuck halfway through a femur. The collection jars need cleaning. You'll need fresh sawdust to absorb the various fluids. It's one thing to kill someone on judicial orders. It's another to literally commodify their death, to transform their body into profit. But what choice do you have? Refuse, and the council will find an executioner who won't. At least you can ensure it's done with some measure of respect, not that respect means much when you're sawing through someone's rib cage. Young Eric appears in the doorway, takes in the medical equipment, and sighs. Body Merchant Day? He's been through this before. Fassbender from Heidelberg, you confirm. Wants everything fresh. Eric makes a face. Remember that physician from Munich who wanted us to deliver the head separately so he could study criminal cognition or whatever? Still gives me nightmares. You remember. The good doctor had theorized that criminal thoughts left physical marks on the brain, like grooves on a record. He'd been very disappointed when the thief's brain looked remarkably similar to anyone else's. At least it pays well, Eric offers, but even he sounds unconvinced. Blood money is one thing. This is something else entirely, something that makes even hardened executioners queasy. You're not just society's killer anymore. You're its ghoul, its resurrection man, its dealer in the currency of flesh. Historians still argue whether this trade advanced medical knowledge or just satisfied morbid curiosity dressed up as science. But standing here with your bone saw and collection jars, you know which one it feels like. The walk home after delivering Fassbender his materials takes twice as long as usual because you're dodging the entire population of the city. Word travels fast about botched executions, and now everyone knows you're the executioner who hugged a dying man's legs while he danced on air. The baker's wife actually crosses herself when she sees you coming. A group of children follows you throwing pebbles until a constable half-heartedly tells them to stop. The constable then spits in your direction, so his heart clearly wasn't in the intervention. You finally reach your building, climbing the stairs while trying to ignore the neighbors who slam their doors as you pass. Inside your room, you strip off the red coat that's now decorated with suspicious stains from your morning's butcher work. The water in your basin is yesterday's, but it'll have to do. As you wash Hans's blood from under your fingernails, it always gets under the fingernails. You hear it, the whispers through the thin walls, the neighbors discussing you like you're not 3 feet away. Saw him coming up the stairs, Frau Gottlieb hisses to someone, covered in blood again, and that smell. Devil's work, comes the reply. My Johann says he saw lights in the executioner's room at midnight, unnatural lights. Probably consorting with the corpses, Frau Gottlieb decides. You know what they say about executioners and their appetites. You almost laugh. If only they knew you spent midnight drinking cheap wine and trying to forget the feeling of Hans's convulsions, not conducting satanic rituals. Though honestly, devil worship might be more socially acceptable than your actual profession. The irony is, you're probably cleaner than most of them. Your job requires constant washing. Blood is surprisingly difficult to get out of fabric, and the smell of death clings like a desperate lover. You wash your hands more times a day than a fastidious housewife. Your clothes get laundered weekly, which is more than most people can say. But none of that matters, because the contamination they fear isn't physical, it's spiritual, moral, existential. You could bathe in holy water, and they'd still cross the street to avoid you. A stone crashes through your window, accompanied by a child's laughter. This is the 3rd window this month. The glazier charges you double and makes you wait outside while he works, so you've given up replacing them. Just stuff rags in the hole and pretend it's ventilation. You peek through the gap and see the Murphy boys racing away, proud of their assault on the neighborhood monster. Their mother will scold them if she finds out, not for throwing stones, but for getting too close to your building. Executioner cooties are apparently transmissible through proximity. The evening ritual begins, checking the door locks twice, wedging a chair under the handle, because locks can be picked, but furniture is harder to argue with, and settling in for another night of social isolation. Your supper is cold bread and harder cheese, eaten alone while listening to the sounds of normal life through the walls. The Gottliebs are arguing about money. The Schmidt's baby is crying. Someone's practicing a lute, badly. It's a symphony of ordinary existence that you can hear but never join. This is when the regrets really sink in. Not guilt over the killing. That's just a job, like any other. Well, not like any other. But you've made your peace with the moral complexities. No, the regret is for everything else you'll never have. A wife to argue about money with, a baby to keep you up at night for normal reasons instead of nightmares. The simple pleasure of practicing an instrument badly without people assuming you're summoning demons. The mainstream historical fact nobody talks about. Executioners had one of the highest rates of suicide in medieval professions. Hard to imagine why. You're contemplating whether to open the wine when you hear footsteps on the stairs. Not the usual neighborly traffic. These are hesitant, furtive. A knock comes, so soft you almost miss it. This is unusual. Nobody visits executioners after dark unless they're desperate or up to no good. You grab the poker from the fireplace because desperate people and people up to no good can both be dangerous, and open the door a crack. It's a young woman, heavily veiled, clutching a cloth bundle. "Are you the executioner?" she whispers, as if there might be multiple red coat-wearing social pariahs in the building. You nod. She thrusts the bundle at you. That is, they say you sell." She can't finish the sentence, but you understand. She needs something from your professional inventory. Probably thinks she's pregnant and wants one of those remedies that supposedly prevent such things. Or maybe she has a growth and believes powdered skull will shrink it. The desperately hopeful are your best customers. "I don't sell anything." You lie, because you're not running a shop out of your room at midnight. Try the apothecary on Merchant Street. She shakes her head frantically. "He sent me to you, said that only fresh blood would work for my father's falling sickness. Please, I have money." She opens the bundle to reveal more coins than someone of her apparent status should have. Probably sold everything valuable to afford this last hope. The quirky historical tidbit? Executioner's blood was particularly prized for epilepsy, based on the logic that someone who dealt death must have power over life. The fact that it didn't work never stopped people from trying. You're about to close the door when she does something unexpected. She looks you in the eye, really looks at you, not through you or past you, but at you, like you're an actual person. "Please," she says, "he's all I have left." And maybe it's the wine, or the loneliness, or just the novel experience of being seen, but you hear yourself saying, "Wait here." You return with a small vial of pig's blood because you're not a complete monster, and yes, You keep pig's blood for exactly this purpose. Fresh from this morning, you lie. 3 drops in wine, twice daily. She pays without haggling, whispers a thank you, and disappears into the night. You close the door and lean against it, clutching her coins. Blood money twice over now. Paid for killing. Paid for lying about killing. At least the pig was already dead. You add the coins to your hidden stash, the one you're saving for. What? Retirement? Escape? A new life somewhere nobody knows what you are? Fat chance. The executioner's mark follows you like your own shadow. But still, you save. Because what else is there to do? Tomorrow you'll wake up, put on your red coat, and continue existing on the margins of humanity. But tonight, for just a moment, a desperate woman looked you in the eye and saw someone who could help. It's not much, but it's something. You pour yourself wine and try not to think about how low your standards for human interaction have fallen. The marriage situation is, to put it mildly, complicated. You're 32 years old, financially stable, and own your own tools. By Renaissance standards, you should be drowning in marriage proposals. Instead, you're drowning in solitude and the peculiar shame of being romantically untouchable. The only women who'll even speak to you are prostitutes, and they charge extra for the psychological hazard of betting the hangman. Last time you visited the brothel, Mad Martha took one look at your red coat and doubled her rates. Death might be catching, she explained, not unkindly. Can't be too careful. The cruel joke is that executioners usually marry executioners' daughters. It's like a hereditary disease that breeds true. Your father tried to arrange a match with the Nuremberg executioner's girl, but she ran off with a rat catcher instead. A rat catcher. Apparently, killing vermin ranked higher on the social acceptability scale than killing people. The rejection stung more than any thrown stone. At least with stones, you can duck. Your mother, God rest her soul, was the daughter of the Munich executioner. Your parents' wedding was the social event of the season for outcasts. 6 executioner families attended, traveling from across Bavaria to celebrate 2 of their own finding love in this cold world. Your mother used to tell you stories about it, how they had to hold the ceremony in a barn outside town because no church would host them, how the only music came from a blind fiddler who didn't know who was paying him, how beautiful it all was anyway. Love finds a way, she'd say, usually while patching up your clothes after another encounter with stone-throwing children. She died when you were 15, probably from the shame as much as the fever. Now the Regional Executioners Network has you in their sights. Letters arrive monthly from colleagues offering their daughters, sisters, nieces, any female relative of marriageable age who shares the family curse. My Gretchen is 17, strong arms for helping with the heavy work, doesn't faint at blood. My sister's widow, only 25, already knows the trade. My daughter can read and write, keeps excellent execution records. They send little portraits sometimes, miniatures painted by traveling artists who specialize in the outcast trade. You keep them in a drawer, these faces of women you'll never meet, because accepting would mean admitting defeat. The thing is, you've seen normal love. You watch it from your window, like a starving man outside a feast. The baker's apprentice courts the candlemaker's daughter with shy smiles and small gifts. The young couple next door argues and makes up with passionate whispers through thin walls. Even ugly old Herman, the rag picker, has a wife who looks at him like he hung the moon. But you get to watch life happen to other people while yours passes in solitary confinement. There was one time, once, when you thought maybe. Her name was Sophia, a traveling merchant's daughter who didn't know who you were. You'd left off the red coat, dressed like a normal person, went to the fair in the next town where nobody knew your face. She smiled at you over her father's cloth goods, and for 3 perfect hours, you were just a man talking to a woman about silk and weather and the best routes through the mountains. Then her father returned, took one look at your hands. Executioner's hands are distinctive, something about the way we hold them, and dragged her away. The look she gave you over her shoulder wasn't anger or fear. It was worse. It was pity. The mainstream historical fact that breaks your heart? Some executioners did find love outside their caste, but at tremendous cost. The women who married executioners became instant outcasts, dead to their families, stripped of any social standing they'd had. Their children bore the executioner's stigma, regardless of their father's feelings about the profession. One documented case from Augsburg tells of a merchant's daughter who married the executioner for love. Her family held a funeral for her, an actual funeral, complete with empty coffin and mourning clothes. As far as they were concerned, she'd died the day she said, "I do." So you content yourself with purchased affection and stolen glances. Mad Martha's establishment knows your schedule now. Execution days are busy, so you come the night before. The girls draw lots to see who has to take you. Last winter was young Catherine. She's 40, but in her profession, anyone under 50 is young, who spent the whole encounter telling you about her sick mother while you tried to pretend this was normal intimacy. It wasn't, but it was better than nothing. Everything in your life is better than nothing. The letters keep coming. Hamburg's executioner has twin daughters. Cologne's has a slightly used niece whose husband died of plague. You should probably pick one. Start your own family of outcasts. Produce sons to carry on this inherited curse. It's what your father expected, what the profession demands. But sometimes, late at night, you take out Sophia's handkerchief. She dropped it during your conversation, and you kept it like the pathetic fool you are, and wonder what life might have been if you'd been born the baker's son instead. The quirky historical tidbit that nobody mentions. Some executioners' wives became formidable figures in their own right. They couldn't join normal society, so they created their own. They became midwives to prostitutes and criminals' wives, healers to the desperate, keepers of secrets that proper folk wouldn't trust to anyone respectable. Your mother was like that, a shadow woman serving shadow people, making the best of a bad situation. Maybe that's what you need, not a normal wife, but a partner in pariahhood, someone who understands that love on the margins is still love. You pour another wine and consider the latest letter. Leipzig's executioner has a daughter who's sturdy, practical, and doesn't dream of better things. Sounds perfect, Sounds horrible. Sounds like exactly what you deserve. Tomorrow you'll think about it. Tonight, you'll drink to Sophia and the 3 hours when you were just a man, not a monster. The handkerchief still smells faintly of lavender. You're definitely getting desperate when executioners' daughters start looking like a good option. But then again, desperate is just another word for realistic when you're in your position. The coin purse weighs heavy in your hand as you count this month's earnings. 20 guilders from executions, 15 from floggings, another 10 from Dr. Fassbender's medical supplies, and 5 from various desperate souls seeking miracle cures. 50 guilders total, more than most craftsmen see in 3 months. You're rich by any reasonable standard, and yet here you sit in a drafty room above a butcher shop, counting coins that nobody wants to touch. The money paradox of the executioner, paid well to live poorly, wealthy in currency, but bankrupt in everything else. You've tried spending it, God knows. But watch what happens when you walk into a decent shop. The silk merchant sees you coming and suddenly remembers urgent business in the back room. The goldsmith develops a suspicious cough that requires an immediate bed rest. Even the taverns that will serve you, all 3 of them, keep your coins separate, washing them in holy water or vinegar before they'll touch them. One innkeeper actually makes you put your payment in a bucket of water at the door, fishes it out with tongs like it might bite, then burns sulfur to cleanse the air after you leave. The property situation is even more laughable. By law, you can't own land within the city walls. Well, technically you can, but good luck finding someone willing to sell to you. The one time you tried, working through an intermediary who didn't mention your profession, the deal fell apart the moment the seller learned who was actually buying. He returned your deposit wrapped in so many protective charms it looked like a witch's craft project. The note simply said, "I'd rather it stand empty than cursed." The building still stands empty 2 years later. Apparently, financial ruin is preferable to executioner money. So you rent, at triple the normal rate, from landlords desperate enough to take anyone's coin. Your current arrangement with Herr Kaufmann involves leaving rent money in a specially designated hollow tree outside the city gates. He pretends he doesn't know where it comes from. You pretend you don't know. He charges other tenants a third of what you pay, and everyone maintains the fiction that this is a normal business relationship. The tree probably has more social standing than you do. The banking situation deserves its own level of hell. The fuggers, those financial maestros who lend money to kings and popes, won't open an account for a simple executioner. You tried once, dressed in your best non-red clothes, speaking carefully to hide any trace of your profession. The clerk was all smiles until he asked for your occupation. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees when you answered honestly. "I'm afraid we're not accepting new accounts at this time," he said, which was interesting since they'd just accepted the baker's account 5 minutes earlier. So you hide money like a criminal, which is ironic since you're one of the few people in town who literally can't break the law without losing your job. Coins sewn into your mattress, guilders hidden in false-bottomed chests, a small fortune buried in various locations outside the city walls that you visit at night like some demented squirrel checking his nuts. You've got more money than most merchants, but live like a pauper because spending it requires human interaction, and humans would rather interact with actual plague carriers than you. The quirky historical detail. Some executioners got so wealthy they became shadow bankers themselves, lending money to other outcasts who couldn't access regular credit. Your predecessor apparently ran a tidy side business financing prostitutes, traveling players, and other social rejects. The interest rates were better than the official usurers because, let's face it, you understand what it's like to be refused service everywhere. He kept meticulous records in a coded ledger, which you still have but can't decipher, probably for the best. Being a executioner slash moneylender sounds like a special kind of social suicide. The accumulation of wealth becomes its own kind of torment. Every coin is a reminder of what you did to earn it. Every guilder, a small piece of someone's death. You've got blood money literally hidden in your walls. And for what? You can't buy respectability, can't purchase a normal life, can't even get a decent meal without drama. The merchants who grudgingly serve you know you could buy their entire shop inventory, but they still make you wait outside like a diseased dog. There's a knock at your door, probably another desperate soul seeking executioner's blood for some imagined cure. These late-night customers are your most reliable income source, which says something depressing about humanity. You consider not answering, but money is money, even if you can't spend it properly. The knock comes again, more insistent. Coming, you mutter, grabbing your price list. Yes, you have an actual price list now, professional standards and all that. But when you open the door, it's not a customer, it's Herr Kaufman, your landlord, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I need to speak with you, he says, not meeting your eyes. Your stomach drops. This can't be good. Landlords don't make social calls on executioners unless they're about to become ex-landlords. If this is about the rent, I just left this month's payment in the tree. It's not about the rent, he interrupts. I'm selling the building. The new owner doesn't want your kind here. Your kind, like you're a species, not a person. I see, you say, because what else is there to say? You've got enough money to buy the building yourself, cash on the barrelhead. But that's not how the world works. You have until month's end, Kaufman continues, already backing away like poverty might be contagious. I'm sorry. He's not sorry. He's relieved. One less moral complication in his life. After he leaves, you sit among your hidden wealth and laugh. Or maybe it's crying. Hard to tell the difference anymore. 50 guilders a month, enough to live like minor nobility, and you'll be lucky to find another rat-infested hovel that'll take you. The money paradox in all its glory, rich enough to buy respectability, too contaminated to rent it. You pour wine and start mentally mapping where you've buried your coins. Time to start looking for another hollow tree, another landlord desperate enough to take executioner money, another place to exist without living. Historians still argue whether executioners were economically exploited or privileged, but they're missing the point. You can't eat gold coins when no one will sell you bread. You can't sleep under guilders when no one will rent you a roof. Money without humanity is just metal, and you've got plenty of metal. It's everything else you're bankrupt in. The letter arrives on a Tuesday, delivered by a nervous courier who drops it on your doorstep and flees like it might explode. You recognize the seal, the City Council of Regensburg. This is never good news. Cities only write to executioners when they need something killed, and they only write urgently when something's gone very wrong with their current arrangement. You break the seal and read, then read again to make sure you're understanding correctly. Their executioner is dead, fell from the scaffold during maintenance, broke his neck. The irony is so thick you could spread it on bread. They need a replacement immediately. 3 condemned prisoners waiting, getting expensive to feed, crowd getting restless. Here's the thing about changing cities. It's theoretically possible, but practically a nightmare. You can't just pack up and move like a normal person. There are forms to file, permissions to obtain, guarantees to secure. Your current city has to formally release you from service, which they hate doing because training new executioners is a pain. The new city has to formally accept you, which means public announcements, registrations, and all sorts of bureaucratic dancing that makes everyone uncomfortable. It's like a very morbid marriage negotiation, except nobody's happy about it. But you're tempted. God help you. You're tempted. A fresh start in a city where nobody knows about the Hans Mueller fiasco, where the whispers haven't had time to calcify into local legend, where maybe, just maybe, you could do your job without quite so much baggage. You know it's a fantasy. Executioners are pariahs everywhere, but Regensburg is bigger than here. More corners to disappear into, more shadows to hide in. Plus, their letter mentions a house, an actual house, not rooms above a shop. Granted, it's probably next to the graveyard or the tanneries or some other undesirable location, but walls that belong to you? That's almost worth considering. The smart move is to stay put. You know the local customs, the traditions, which priests will give you last rites and which will spit when you pass. You know which merchants will serve you, which times to shop when the streets are empty, which routes to take to avoid the worst harassment. Starting over means learning all new patterns of avoidance, developing new routines of isolation. But staying means Hans Muller's ghost every time you walk past the scaffold, means Frau Gottlieb's whispers through the walls forever, means watching the baker's apprentice marry the candlemaker's daughter while you grow old alone above a butcher shop. You draft a reply, careful with your words, express sorrow for their loss. Ha! Sam. Interest in the position, desperation, more like. Request details about compensation and accommodation. Will you triple charge me for bread or merely double? The courier who takes your response looks like he's handling a live snake. You want to tell him it's just paper and ink, that executioner cooties aren't actually transmissible through correspondence, but why bother? He'll wash his hands in holy water anyway. 3 days later, another letter. They're getting desperate. One of the condemned is a nobleman who needs beheading, not hanging, and they don't trust the local blacksmith to swing true. They're offering twice your current salary, a house with garden, and, this is unusual, formal protection from harassment. Apparently, Regensburg had some incidents with mobs attacking their executioners, so they passed laws. Throw stones at the hangman, pay a fine, assault him, lose a hand. It's not respect, but it's better than nothing. Everything in your life is better than nothing. The quirky historical detail nobody mentions. Executioner recruitment was a genuine crisis for many cities. When one died or fled, they'd have to scramble for replacements, sometimes borrowing from neighboring towns at exorbitant rates. There are records of cities basically poaching each other's executioners, offering better houses, higher wages, even throwing in perks like free medical care, occupational hazard insurance, really. One executioner in Augsburg managed to negotiate a deal that included education for his children at the city school. The other parents protested, naturally, but the city needed their hangman more than they needed happy parents. You seek advice from young Eric, who's sharpening axes in the courtyard. Regensburg, eh? He tests a blade with his thumb, draws blood, nods satisfaction. Heard their last man was a drunk, explains the falling off the scaffold. Also heard they've got a proper execution square, not like our market day setup. Stone platform, permanent gallows, the works. Professional pride stirring despite yourself. A proper workspace. Tools that don't have to be assembled and disassembled for every execution. But, Eric continues, new city means new enemies. At least here, people have gotten used to hating you. There, you'll be fresh meat. He's got a point. There's something almost comfortable about familiar hatred. You know which children throw stones, the Murphy boys, which dogs bark, all of them, which neighbors pretend you don't exist, also all of them. In Regensburg, you'd have to learn a whole new choreography of avoidance. But you're also thinking about that garden, growing your own vegetables, because no market seller wants to touch food you've touched. Maybe some herbs for the medical side business. A patch of earth that's yours, even if it's cursed ground. You spend the night weighing options like you're measuring rope for a hanging. Stay and slowly fossilize into local legend. The executioner who hugged a dying man's legs. Or go and discover new depths of isolation in a strange city. Both feel like different forms of death sentence. But at least Regensburg is offering good money for your particular form of living death. And that house with a garden keeps dancing in your mind. Your own walls, your own door to lock, your own patch of cursed ground to call home. By morning, you've decided you'll negotiate a bit, always negotiate, even when desperate, but you'll go. It's not hope, exactly. Hope is for people who haven't been pelted with vegetables by an angry mob. It's more like professional curiosity. How bad could Regensburg be compared to here? Famous last words for an executioner, but you're committed now. You draft your acceptance, seal it with wax, and that bitter laugh that's become your signature. Time to disappoint a whole new city. The years pass like kidney stones, slowly and painfully. You took the Regensburg job, lasted 3 years before their city council decided you were too expensive and hired your apprentice for half the rate. Moved to Würzburg, where you developed a reputation for clean beheadings, but also for that persistent cough that started after a particularly damp winter in the execution grounds. Then Heidelberg, where the university physicians paid well for fresh specimens, but the students made sport of following you through streets, chanting anatomical terms. Now you're in Frankfurt, 53 years old, and your body is a catalog of professional wear and tear. Your hands shake in the mornings now, not from drink, though there's plenty of that, but from decades of gripping axe handles, pulling ropes, turning screws on devices better left undescribed. The arthritis is so bad some days you can barely hold a spoon, let alone a sword. Last month's execution took 3 swings, not because you miscalculated, but because your grip failed mid-swing. The crowd thought you were incompetent. You didn't correct them. Better they think you stupid than see you weak. The back problems are worse. Turns out hefting dead bodies and live prisoners for 30 years does things to your spine that God never intended. You walk hunched now, like you're permanently bowing to the crowds that despise you. Getting out of bed is its own form of torture, ironic, considering your professional expertise in that area. Young assistants do most of the heavy lifting now, but pride keeps you swinging the axe yourself. Pride in the knowledge that the moment you can't perform, you're just another useless old man with a very specific, very unmarketable skill set. But it's not just the body that's failing. The mind goes too, in its own special way. You dream about every execution, a nightly parade of faces frozen at the moment of death. Hans Müller makes regular appearances, still purple-faced and gasping. The young woman from Heidelberg who cried for her mother. The old priest who blessed you as you positioned the noose, that one haunts you differently. They blur together sometimes, creating composite ghosts that visit when you're awake too. Walking through the market, you'll see a familiar profile and think, didn't I hang him last year? Before remembering that yes, you did, so he's probably not buying cabbages. The psychological weight manifests physically. Headaches that feel like your skull is in thumbscrews, a constant knot in your stomach that food can't fill and wine can't dissolve. Your heart does this thing where it suddenly races like you're running from a mob, even when you're sitting still. The Frankfurt physician you consulted, one of the few who'll treat you for triple fees, called it melancholic distemper and prescribed herbs that don't work. What you've got isn't in his medical texts. It's the accumulated weight of being death's bureaucrat for 3 decades. The quirky historical detail? Executioners had their own informal medical network, sharing remedies for profession-specific ailments. Letters would circulate with advice. For the shaking hands, try soaking in salt water heated with copper coins. For the back pains, hang upside down from the gallows for count of 30. For the dreams, drink wolfsbane tea, but carefully, too much, and you'll be meeting your customers personally. Some of it probably worked through placebo effect. Most of it was desperate people trying anything to keep functioning in a job that slowly destroyed them. You've started training Wilhelm, your latest assistant. He's young, strong, and stupid enough to think this profession might work out differently for him. You try to warn him about the isolation, the accumulating damage, the way it hollows you out, but he sees the steady pay and official position. Kid thinks he's getting a good deal. You were young once, too, thought you could handle it, maybe even find some nobility in being society's necessary monster. Now look at you, hands that shake, back that won't straighten, mind full of ghosts, and a lifetime of being untouchable stretching behind you like a blood-stained carpet. The worst part? You can't retire. There's no pension plan for executioners, no gold watch and farewell party. You work until you can't, and then you hope you've saved enough to die somewhere quiet. Your father worked until a stroke took him mid-swing. The condemned had to wait 2 hours for them to find someone else to finish the job. That's your future, dying on the scaffold, or worse, living past usefulness, just another broken old man who used to kill for the state. Some nights, when the pain's particularly bad and the wine isn't helping, you think about the irony. You've sent hundreds to their deaths, quick and mostly clean, while you're dying by inches, slowly and miserably. They got the mercy of a sharp blade or a short drop. You get the executioner's real punishment, living with what you've done in a body that's falling apart from doing it. The torture devices in your workshop seem almost merciful compared to the slow rack of age and accumulated trauma. But tomorrow you'll get up, eventually, after the back unlocks, and do it again. Because what else is there? You're too old to start over, too damaged to do anything else, too stubborn to give Wilhelm the satisfaction of taking over completely. You'll oil your aching joints like you oil your axes, ignore the shaking like you ignore the whispers, and pretend that 53 isn't ancient for someone in your profession. The show must go on, even if the performer is falling apart, especially then. The crowd loves a good tragedy, and you've been providing one for longer than you care to remember. The fever comes on a Tuesday, though in your delirium, days lose meaning. One moment you're sharpening an axe, the next you're on your narrow bed, sheets soaked with sweat that smells like fear and old metal. Wilhelm finds you 3 days later. He only checked because there's an execution scheduled, and you missed the preparation meeting. The look on his face tells you what you already know. This is how it ends. Not on the scaffold like your father, but in a dingy room, alone except for an assistant who's already calculating when he can officially take over. The physician won't come. Wilhelm tries 3 before giving up, returning with a hedge witch who'll treat anyone for the right price. She takes one look at you, crosses herself, and starts mixing something that smells like grave dirt and disappointment. The executioner's curse, she mutters, like that's a real medical diagnosis. Seen it before. The body finally refuses to carry what the soul's been bearing. You want to tell her that's ridiculous, that you've just got a fever, but your throat feels like you've been practicing on yourself with the strangling cord. Word spreads. It always does when death comes for death's professional. The neighbors who've ignored you for years suddenly develop acute hearing, listening for your final breath through the walls. You hear Frau Weber tell someone, "About time. That devil's lived too long already." Charming. Even dying. You can't get a break from the hatred, though honestly, part of you agrees with her. 53 years feels like a century when you've lived them in your particular kind of isolation. The priest situation becomes urgent. Wilhelm sends messages to every church in Frankfurt, but the responses are predictable, too busy, out of town, suddenly ill themselves. Finally, on the 5th day, when your fever's so high you're seeing executed men sitting at the foot of your bed playing cards, an old Franciscan shows up. Brother Thomas, half blind and possibly senile, but willing to give last rites to anyone with a soul. Even executioners, you croak. He squints at you, especially executioners. You've sent many to judgment. Seems only fair someone sends you properly too. The confession takes hours, not because you've got so many sins, though there's plenty, but because you keep losing track of which deaths were real and which are fever dreams. I killed the Duke of Augsburg. You ramble. No, wait, he's still alive. I killed his cook. No, that was a chicken. I killed. Brother Thomas patiently sorts through the delirium, extracting real confessions from fantasy. The bodies you've executed were sentenced by lawful authority. He reminds you, the sin, if any, belongs to the system, not the sword. It's more absolution than you expected. Honestly, between fever spikes, you achieve moments of terrible clarity. This is it. No wife to hold your hand. No children to carry on the family curse. A blessing, really. Just Wilhelm hovering like a carrion bird, and Brother Thomas dozily mumbling prayers. Your fortune, hidden in walls and buried in fields, will rot there unclaimed because you never told anyone where it is. Fitting end for blood money. The tools will pass to Wilhelm, who'll probably nick himself with the axe within a week. The red coat will find a new wearer. The world will keep needing executioners, just not you. The quirky historical detail nobody talks about. Executioners' deaths were often communal events in the worst way. Other outcasts would gather, gravediggers, rat catchers, prostitutes, not from affection, but from a kind of morbid solidarity. Death of one pariah reminded them all of their shared fate. Sure enough, as word spreads, your room fills with the professionally damned. Mad Martha from the brothel brings soup you can't eat. The night soil man sits quietly in the corner. Even the knacker who disposes of dead horses shows up. It's the closest thing to family you've got. This collection of people society wishes didn't exist. On what you're pretty sure is the 8th day, the fever breaks long enough for you to speak clearly. Wilhelm, you manage. The false bottom in the trunk, 300 guilders. Use it. Use it for... What? What wisdom do you have for your successor? Use it to get out if you can. Find another trade. This one's cursed. He nods solemnly, but you see the calculation in his eyes. He won't leave. The pay's too good, and he's young enough to think he'll handle it better. Every executioner thinks that at first. The end comes at dawn. Fitting, really, since dawn was when you did most of your work. Brother Thomas is snoring in the chair, but Mad Martha's still there, holding your hand like you're just another dying man, not the monster who's haunted Frankfurt's nightmares. It's all right, she whispers. Let go. You've carried enough. And maybe it's the fever, or the unexpected kindness, or just exhaustion, but you do. You let go of the ghostly faces, the weight of the axe, the isolation that's defined your existence. For the first time in 53 years, you're not the executioner. You're just another soul heading toward whatever judgment waits. They bury you outside the city walls, in the unconsecrated ground reserved for suicides and criminals and those who lived outside society's grace. No headstone, Executioners don't get memorials, but the outcasts come, standing awkwardly around the hole, while Brother Thomas, bless his senile heart, insists on reading the full funeral service. Mad Martha drops a flower on the coffin. The gravedigger fills the hole with professional efficiency. Wilhelm's already wearing the red coat, looking important and doomed. And somewhere in the crowd of professional mourners and social rejects, a young boy watches with curious eyes. The gravedigger's son, maybe, or just another child drawn to the spectacle of the hangman's funeral. He'll go home and tell his friends about the strange gathering at the crossroads, about the people who cried for the monster everyone hated. Maybe he'll grow up to throw stones at Wilhelm, or maybe, just maybe, he'll remember that even executioners die alone and afraid, just like everyone else. That us under the red coat and the terrible profession, there was just a man who spent his life as death's unwilling servant, paying a price that no amount of guilders could compensate. History will forget you. Of course, executioners don't get remembered unless they botch the job spectacularly. You're just another nameless cog in the machinery of Renaissance justice, a footnote in someone else's death sentence. But for a brief moment, in that unconsecrated ground outside Frankfurt's walls, a prostitute and a senile priest and a collection of society's unwanted stood witness to your passing. It's not much of a legacy, but then again, everything in your life was better than nothing, even your death. The night settles deeper around us now, and those harsh scenes from centuries past begin to fade like smoke in the evening air. The executioner's red coat dissolves into the darkness, where all difficult memories eventually go to rest. His story, your story, for these past minutes, drifts away on the quiet breeze of approaching sleep. Take a long, slow breath. Feel how different it sits in your chest compared to his labored breathing. Your hands rest peacefully at your sides, free from the weight of terrible tools and darker burdens. The softness of your pillow knows nothing of blood-stained gold or stones thrown in anger. Here in this moment, you're simply you, warm, safe, and blissfully removed from those shadows of the past. Let any lingering images wash away like rain on old cobblestones. The crowds disperse into whispers, then silence. The scaffold becomes driftwood, then dust, then nothing at all. All those sharp edges of history smooth themselves into the gentle curves of drowsiness. Your breathing slows to match the rhythm of deep rest approaching on velvet feet. Tomorrow will come with its own small worries and familiar joys, but none of them wear red coats or carry the weight of society's darkest necessities. You'll wake to a world where your neighbors nod good morning and shopkeepers smile at your coins, where touch means comfort, not contamination, where breakfast can be shared with friends and love doesn't require a curse to find you. So close your eyes now, feeling gratitude for this ordinary life that would have seemed like impossible luxury to our forgotten executioner. Let sleep wrap around you like the kindest embrace, free from ghosts and gallows, carrying only peaceful dreams on its gentle wings. Rest well, knowing that some burdens belong only to history, and history is very far away from this quiet moment. Sweet dreams, and thank you for listening.